Welcome back to Anchorage, Alaska tonight, where all eyes will be watching President Trump's major summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin as it happens here tomorrow, and a possible deal to bring an end to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as it could hinge on Putin's strategy when it comes to holding on to occupied Ukrainian territory at all cost.
Any peace deal in Ukraine is going to ultimately be about land. And when President Trump talks about swapping territories, this is Russian-occupied areas, but it's these three parts here, black surrounded, that have always been part of Russian President Vladimir Putin's most maximalist war goals. It's what he wants. The lines we've drawn as best as we can here, but the stakes are incredibly high. Any minor inaccuracy of my pen could be a place that thousands of people have fought and died for, or still live. Now, in just recent days, there's been a tiny advance here by the Russians, but it's significant and caused some concern and even denials and reinforcements sent from Kiev. But this Donetsk area is potentially, if we understand what the Kremlin's proposed, somewhere they want Ukrainians to withdraw from entirely in exchange for a ceasefire. And look at it, it's a huge area. What could they give back? These tiny border parts occupied by Russia, a buffer zone, President Putin calls it, but it's hardly a fair exchange.
My source tonight is CNN senior military analyst Admiral James Stavridis, who is the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander and also a partner at the Carlyle Group, which is a global investment firm. And it's so great to have you here tonight, sir, because I do think that map that Nick Payton-Wallace was just laying out, that is so key. And his point there about a small but significant advance that the Russians have been taking in Ukraine in recent days. I saw Zelensky said earlier he thinks that's just them trying to set the table to convince President Trump tomorrow, look, Russia does have the upper hand. That is why we should try to strike an agreement here now when it comes to that territory. What do you make of what the landscape looks like going into tomorrow?
Kaitlan, I'd go back 3 years ago when Vladimir Putin told all of us that he was going to run the table and conquer all of Ukraine in 3 or 4 days. He said he was going to take Kyiv by the end of a week. His objective all along has been to conquer this entire vast country, an enormous land space in Europe, the largest continental country in Europe. Where's he at? Well, after 3 years, billion casualties, cratering his economy overall, isolating himself diplomatically, he's managed to conquer 18%. I would hardly call that a win. And yes, he has, in the last few weeks, carved out a few more square miles of this vast country. I don't think it's a big military success for him, nor do I think he is going into this with a particularly strong hand of cards. So I hope, and I kind of think President Trump will go into this negotiation and say, you know, Vladimir, I've got a deal for you. You can get 20% of the country. That's kind of the best you're going to do. And let's get this thing stopped. Let's have a ceasefire. Let's get to the negotiating table. If I were advising President Putin, which I assure you I'm not, I'm sanctioned by the Kremlin, as you probably know, Kaitlan, I would tell Putin, take the deal, because if he really angers President Trump and we continue to play cards against Putin, it's Putin who's going to have a problem here, not Zelensky, not the United States.
Yes, I do remember that you have been sanctioned by the Kremlin. When it comes, though, to you're making the rational argument, saying this is why Putin should take that. That would be your advice to him. But, you know, I reread today on the flight here to Anchorage the 7,000-word essay that Putin wrote in 2021 of why basically Ukraine doesn't exist as its own independent country, that it is still Russia. And, I mean, his designs on it have not changed based on anything that he has indicated publicly. So do you expect that he is coming to the table tomorrow as a willing participant in a negotiation, or is he just coming to buy more time?
The latter. He is going to play rope-a-dope with President Trump. I hope President Trump doesn't permit him to do that. I've read that same essay, Kaitlan, and you know what? I think it's a rationalization. The reason Putin wants Ukraine isn't some mystic vision of Russian nationalism. The reason Putin wants Ukraine is the good old-fashioned reason: resources. He wants the oil, the gas, the agrarian products. Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. And above all, he wants control of the 40 million Ukrainians. He wants to conquer it in the same way the Roman Empire wanted to conquer Gaul. And that is something we need to prevent. Now, having said all that, are we at a point where we should have an open conversation about trading land for peace? 20% to Putin, 80% sails on, free and democratic? I would say yes. Those are decisions for Ukrainians, not for Americans. But I think at this stage in the war, that would make a lot of sense for the Ukrainians to have an open mind to that deal, if backed up by the United States. That's what I'm hearing from President Trump.
Yeah, that's a key if there, of course. Admiral, always great to have your expertise. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here. And